So welcome back to the Active Listener. As always, I've got an interesting guest. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning.
Great to have you here. So I guess without further ado, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I live in Scotland now, but I'm from, as we say up here, from down south. I was born in Gloucestershire and born in a place called Stroud. And that's where I spent the first part of my life. Beautiful part of the world. I then went off to uni. I then went to London. I then went to Brussels, and then we came up here. So that's been the geographical thread, I guess. The career thread has been, so from an early stage, I was into environmental stuff. I think that's a really key thing about what I've been up to. I don't know where it came from, but I picked it up at school. I did biology A level. I studied all that similar stuff at uni. And then I found myself wanting to work in the environmental field. And through a few indirect routes, ended up doing that. And then we maybe come back to that on the details of the career. But the main part of my career, I guess, has been in what we can call clean energy, low carbon energy. First of all, in a sort of campaigning, lobbying, policy influencing type NGO type mode. And then I set up a business in the clean energy field up here in Edinburgh. And then the latter part, I then left that business only about 3 years ago now. And everybody uses the word retire to describe what I did. I'm 61 and I'm far too young to retire anyway, and I don't think I ever will. But for me, it was simply another stage of my career. So the environmental passion is still very much there, but children's issues have become more important as well. And I can talk about some of the things I do with that. And how does coaching fit into all this? I mean, I've never really been a full-on professional, full-time, 100% coach. It's never been the plan. However, I did some coaching in my business. That's where I learned to coach, and I do some coaching now. But some of the coaching skills, it's the coaching skills, I think, which is a more interesting thing to talk about. So that's the geography of my background. That's the career bit. I mean, behind everything, it's trite to say, but the key pillars to my life are my family, my wife, my 2 children, and my siblings in particular. And we can come back to that, because sometimes you find yourself bringing coaching skills into conversations you have with your family as well. So that's a little bit about the thread of my life, I guess, so far. Yeah.
Well, great, Michael. It sounds like a lot of stuff we could go into there, and a lot of that is relevant, particularly today with the greening issues and so on. And it sounds like the coaching has been that thread in different ways in all those kind of personal relationships as well as work-related ones. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. So we hear about sort of the background there. I'm just interested to know how you progressed on from business and utilizing the skills that you have from business and coaching to where you are now. What was the transition?
So let's start with, where did I first come across the whole concept of coaching, in the sense that we're talking about today? And that was in the part of my career with the clean energy consultancy business, which I set up in the early 2000s. And then it grew and we started bringing in people, and I can't remember how it happened, but I think we were being advised by a consultant to advise us on helping to manage our team as well as possible, because we wanted everyone in the business to love their job, to work hard, and to be motivated to succeed. And someone must have come along one day and talked to us about this and talked about coaching. And then I think he or she might have mentioned the John Whitmore book, Coaching for Performance, which is an easy read. And I thought, okay, this is all pretty interesting. So I and my director colleagues started adopting some of those techniques, but we were never trained in it. You know, we read a book and we brought common sense skills to it. So I think some of it we did well, and some of it we probably could have done a lot better. But that's where I first became aware of it and the value of it. And then I think I just built that into my everyday work as far as possible when it came to communicating and managing and motivating and all those things that you try to do as best as you can with the team that you have around you, the colleagues and the team that you have around you. So then when I left the business in 2019, in the 6 months leading up to me, I knew about a year ahead that I was going to be leaving, and I thought, okay, well, with the principle always in mind, keep learning stuff, I thought I would learn how to be a coach, and do a coaching course, you know, learn how to do it properly. And so I did a course with the Academy of Executive Coaching in London, really enjoyed it, learned a huge amount. Did I not want to become a coach? Didn't really know at that point. I know now I don't want to be one. But then I left the business. I left the energy business, the clean energy business. I did some coaching and mentoring, some voluntary type coaching and mentoring, some paid for stuff, and I continue to do that, but not on a big scale. And I enjoy that. And the focus I have there, both on the mentoring and the coaching, and you and your listeners will know the huge distinction there. But I like to coach and support owners of small social enterprises. So these are businesses with a purpose, and that's very much my thing. I felt that the energy company that we ran was very much a business with a purpose. So that's what I try to do there, but I do a number of other things as well now. And in no particular order, I volunteer on a helpline for the Scottish children's charity, Children's First. They have a helpline not for children but for parents. It's called Parent Line. There was training for that. I volunteered for that. I've been doing that 3 years now. I did the training, and one thing that struck me very early on was the skill set for the helpline, which is phone only, really, so well corresponds to some of the coaching skills, and we can go into that. But I thought, hang on a minute, this is applying the same skills to two very different contexts. And I do a weekly, sometimes a bi-weekly shift on that. Did one Wednesday evening this week. I mentor I'm part of a mentoring program in Scotland. It's spreading to England, actually, whereby mentors, people like me, ordinary people like me, are matched with care-experienced children within the Scottish state secondary school system. So we have a secondary school just around the corner here. I mentored he began when he was 16, and he's left school now, 17. I mentored a boy there for 2 years, and I've just started with the new school year. I've just picked up another young person to mentor this year. That began online, is now face-to-face, and that's more mentoring, less coaching, but again, so many skills. Connecting in particular with this time I've got a 14-year-old boy, and that's gonna be a challenge for me. But I bring some of the same skill set, including the active listening. Active listening is part of all of this. I do bring the active listening to that role as well. I'm on the board of a Scottish charity that supports families where there is a member of the family with an eating disorder. So the key thing there is that ideally, in an ideal world, normally a young person with the eating disorder, receives whatever support they need from the health system. It's not always the case, but the family around that person get no support or help or guidance at all on all the things they will need support with. So that's the purpose of that charity. And I have just started as a member of the Scottish Children's Hearing System. So it's a little bit different in Scotland to England, the whole child protection infrastructure. but part of the system up here is that there are opportunities to refer for teachers or police or parents or whatever to refer children to the hearing system for legal decisions, which are the purpose of which is to what's the best way of protecting this child and giving a legal enforcement to the protection of that child. So again, listening skills, connecting, open questions, exploring. I would say the coaching skills that I've picked up, and I'm still trying to develop, are an important part of that as well. So there's sorry, Mark, there's quite a few things there, but I think your question was about the transition from the commercial to the non-commercial part of my career, and the thread of the coaching and the coaching skills I picked up at the business, and which I've tried to develop as fully as possible since then, and which I'm continuing to try to develop. Yeah.
Wow, it sounds like you're a very busy man, and I think what's interesting there is that there's been a progression, that you haven't pigeonholed yourself in any way. So you've recognized through business you have a certain skill set regarding people and feeding into them and so on. And obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like that you've recognized your skill set there. The coaching interested you, and there was obviously skills that you had in business which you had to develop further, and you were able to enact those by working with adults initially, by the sounds of things. What I'm interested is actually you decided that wasn't for you. You certainly don't want to do that as a full-time thing. Was there anything particularly which caused you to decide that before we go on and explore?
I would say I wasn't hungry enough for it, probably. There was a moment, I think, during the training when I was just loving all of that world so much, and the people who were doing the training and my fellow trainees, and I was beginning to really see the power of coaching. You know, the immense potential power of coaching. I thought, okay, I just want to throw myself into that pool. And then I think I felt, okay, in order to do that, it's going to be a bit like, you know, do I, you know, I'd started a business once, and it was a lot. It really was a lot of hard work, and I learned a lot from that first time round. Was I ready to do it again? I think I would be ready to do it again if I was hungry enough, but I just wasn't hungry enough. And the whole children's stuff started snowballing a little bit, and I don't regard the two as incompatible at all. And I've tried to say already that there's a huge amount of complementarity between the two, but I just wasn't hungry enough to throw myself into that, because I remember that if you want to start a business, I wouldn't have wanted to be a one-person thing. I would have wanted to grow a business like I had last time, and I think that would have been 110% commitment, probably for a few years, and I wasn't quite hungry enough for that. So, but I do the skills. And I think perhaps I didn't really need to do that in order to keep the skills live and keep developing them and things like that. Yeah, so that's the main reason.
And you know, I think that's really good that you have that self-awareness, because there's almost that point that if you had gone down that route, you could potentially end up disliking the very thing that you feel impassioned by. And one of the things that strikes me is your ability then to recognize the skills that crossover, because you're absolutely right. I could see that the crossover there. I used to be a teacher and a mentor myself, and I can see the skills that I use today certainly relate back to all those years ago, because it's commonality, but obviously you have boundaries in that you don't go into one or the other depending on the circumstance. So I can see how that has evolved for you. One of the things that strikes me throughout your story, so to speak, so far, is that kind of sense of purpose doing good, making an impact, whether that be for the environment, whether that be for people in their career, or whether from what you're doing recently with young people. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose thing is a really important thing, isn't it? And I think it means different things to different people, obviously. And so personally, yes, I think I mean, I've never really thought of having a sense of purpose at all. I've just thought environmental issues interest me and concern me. So what's the point of having a career in anything other than environmental stuff and trying to make the world a little bit of a more environmentally healthy place? I mean, it just didn't seem to be any other option than that. And there have been times through my career when I have tried to visualize myself as doing something very different, and when I've tried to do that, I've always thought, nah, I couldn't have done that, and I'm really glad I'm doing what I'm doing. So, and I think it's the same with all the children's things now. Yeah, I mean, that we all know about the problems and challenges there are facing children. I mean, it's probably been the same through history, but it's very relevant now. And I'll tell you what, I think what got me started with that. So I'm a big fan of cricket. I'm a big cricket fan, and so 10 or 15 years ago, when I didn't really have the time to do it properly, but when my own children were a little bit younger, you get into the things, and they both took up cricket, and they both played it, and I got into cricket coaching, and I got into the coaching the younger children, and you start to, for the first time in my life, really, I saw directly the different behaviours, the different personalities. Certain children who were clearly happy and fine, certain other children who were clearly had real issues, and I was completely unqualified to manage those during a cricket coaching session. But it just got me thinking, and then you meet their parents, and it just got me thinking a little bit about children and why they are how they are. So I think that was a bit of a driver, and for the things I've picked up more recently. And I've become more aware. I've taken more of an interest in it. I've done training and all sorts of things. And obviously, being part of the children's hearing system now, I'm, face to face confronted with, very severe child protection issues every time I do a hearing. So, so the purpose thing, I mean, I wouldn't call it purpose. I would just probably call it things that interest me greatly, concern me greatly. Tons of other things that concern me greatly, but yeah, I guess the sense of purpose thing is an important thing, and whenever I see someone else like that, so I mentioned earlier on, to the extent I do mentoring and coaching now, and I come across and I get the opportunity to coach or mentor the owner of a small social enterprise, which sort of by definition they've got a sense of purpose, that really interests me. And these young people who want to start a business and make a difference, I love that, seeing that sense of purpose. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think what comes across from what you're saying, it's for you anyway, it's almost a matter of fact. Well, it's natural. Why wouldn't you want to help do the environment? Well, it's the environment. Why wouldn't you want to help young people? It's something that you do because you're interested in and obviously believe in, and a lot of people don't have that. They don't have that same desire, or for whatever reason life crowds in and you have to pay the mortgage. So it's really interesting that you've had that opportunity, and it sounds as well, to be honest, particularly the hearing work sounds like it's incredibly challenging. How do you go about looking after yourself in those instances?
So I would say so. I'll not only use the children's hearing work that I've just started doing, but I'll also use the helpline, the parent line helpline I mentioned. So both organizations, the institutions that run them, I mean, the self-care is a really big part of it. So after each parent line shift, you know, you sit down, the supervisor there says, "Are you okay?" You know, and you have that discussion. So there's a lot, you know, the idea of self-care is really very strong. And in the children's hearing system have their own counsellors for panelists as well. Now, there's only been, so far, I've only just started doing the children's panel. I've only done 2 hearings. I'm still learning. I'm learning that I've done all the training. They wouldn't let me into the hearing room to be a panelist unless they felt confident that I could do it. And there's always 3 of us doing it. At the moment, the other 2 I've got are more experienced than me, so that's okay. But neither of the hearings I've done, I've particularly felt at the end of it thinking, I need some time out here. But there have been some parent line shifts where I've had some upsetting calls. It's when it'll happen with the hearing, I'm told, but it's when people are in tears and uncontrollable tears that get me. And so you stick with it while you're on the call, but there's been a couple of calls when I've really needed, the call is finished and I've really needed to leave the call room, and the supervisor is there, they're 100% supportive. And I think that's the key thing, actually, coming back to your question of self-care. Are you confident that the infrastructure around you, the support infrastructure around you, will enable you and give you whatever you need at a particular moment? And in both those, I do have that. A thought that's going through my mind a little bit as we're talking about this, Mark, is you know, there have been times when I've got upset that I think I wouldn't have expected to get upset, and there have been times when I've been almost unaffected when I think other people might have thought, well, why hasn't that affected him? And there's no rhyme or reason to any of that, but I think I'm sort of resilient. I think I'm pretty resilient on that front. I think you need to be resilient, or else you wouldn't be a lot of help on a call or in a hearing. You know, if you needed to step outside because you were so upset, I think you have to stay with it and be aware of what you've got, be aware of the role that you're there for and doing it as well as possible. So that's how I'd answer your question, I think, on self-care. I know the support is there if I need it, and there have been times when I've needed it, and there will be in the future. And that's a massive comfort, obviously.
Yeah, there sounds, again, excuse me, a couple of things there. There's about self-resilience, and what does that mean to you? What does that look like? And also the importance of having, as you put it, some sort of infrastructure system in place of care, of support. So firstly, what does resilience mean to you?
So again, it's really only a word. I mean, I've always known the word resilient, obviously. You know, we know it, but in the context of personality, and I think that I've only become more aware of that in recent years. Because of the sort of stuff I've been doing more recently, and it probably came up in the coaching training I did, and the concept of resilience, and it's certainly been very upfront in my training, all the various trainings I've done for the children's world, because a very formal part of child welfare assessment is what are the sources of resilience in their lives, and where is the sources of resilience absent. I mean, so resilience to me means I think coping well, responding well to a challenging, or the ability to cope well to a very challenging set of circumstances. So I think, and yeah, I don't know whether that's the right definition or not, but that's what it feels like to me. And I think personally, I don't think I'm a hugely resilient person in some ways. I've just talked about ways in which I perhaps am resilient with these calls and the hearings. But actually, I remember when I was setting up the business, and actually through the course of my career, if there were, when knocks came in from the side, or problems or difficulties or crises or things like that, I've not always been confident I can get through them. I mean, I have one way or another, but I think that, certainly in the early part of setting up the energy business, there were times when I thought, oh, I'm not, is this going to work? Am I going to be able to do this? So tons of self-doubt. And so I think we probably all get self-doubt, but I would say that I'm not, on the spectrum of self-doubters, from the Donald Trump has no self-doubt to the most fragile person you can imagine at the other end. I'm a little bit towards that latter end. I think I often need others around me to validate, support, confirm. And certainly getting through those early days in the business, it would have been a fellow director or my wife or a friend or something like that who would have helped. So I think one of the hallmarks of a successful entrepreneur would be high resilience. Somehow, I don't think I do have high resilience, but I sort of got through it somehow or other, and I'm really glad I did. So I use that personal example as a way of demonstrating, how I see resilience. Yeah.
Well, thanks for your honesty there, Michael. That's really refreshing, and I'd argue perhaps that the fact that you are able to recognise that and move on does show resilience, and the sense you were kind of doubting yourself, I think, tapping into that sense of am I able to do that? I think you are. You've got a pedigree, so to speak, in what you've achieved thus far. And I think also what it speaks to me about is this whole thing of being self-aware. And you mentioned doing the training, you become aware of self. And I agree. I mean, certainly that's something that I've experienced, both in terms of my training and various things, I suppose, as I've got older, become more mature in my career and so on, that one becomes much more aware of what we can and can't do. But actually, that isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's how that can be tapped into to understand how other people are, and understand perhaps our interaction with them. And, in terms of coaching, be an active coach, be an active listener, but kind of dialing down on that inner dialogue, what you're actually listening to in order for that not to affect or filter through when someone's presenting to you. So that strikes me. The other thing as well is when you're talking about resilience, and you're talking about structure and effectively support around you, it makes me think about how does that apply to life outside of the context of coaching. You made reference earlier actually to family, and how we have how those coaching skills can be used in other relationships. So unpack that a little bit for me.
So I would say overall, a lot of the skills that I've picked up, you've picked up in learning how to be a coach. And I said earlier on about how that corresponded so strongly to the training I got for the helpline. I mean, it was uncanny, the resemblance to it. And in particular, the listening, the active listening, the ability to listen, giving the person to whom you're speaking space, silences, questioning, you know, skilled questioning, the requirement for empathy, the acceptance of emotion, the turning off of the instinct, the instinct switch we have in ourselves to fix people's problems. I don't know how many things have I listed there, 4 or 5 anyway. I mean, I think they are life skills. And I so wish that I had done whatever I needed to do in my 20s that I've been able to pick up in my 50s. I think yeah, it would have made a difference for sure. So I do find that you bring some of that into conversations with family. I mean, it improves conversations with family, I think. I mean, you might well get a different view from my family, but I think there's sort of just a feeling, you know, I think there's a sense that some of the things I do bring have helped me connect better with the people around me. And, you know, that word connecting is such an important word, I think, because the purpose of all these skills, well, one of the purposes anyway, is to connect better. Because by connecting better, the person you're speaking with can be better heard, can be better understood. And so I think I feel that I have better relationships with my wife, my children, my siblings, my friends, some of the people I now work with, as a consequence of just being a little bit better at some of these things. Still a long way to go, but at least I'm not on level 0 or level 1, where I spent quite a lot of time. And so I do bring it. And actually, some of those skills, you know, they're no one has yet said, Michael, you're in coaching mode now. You know, take your coaching hat off. So that's a good thing. So at least I can bring some of those skills into everyday conversation in a way that it's not bleeding obvious what I'm doing. But I used the word connecting there as well, Mark, and I saw you nod in reference to that. And so quite early on doing the helpline, it wasn't one of the core skills, this word connecting, but I remember one of the supervisors, I think at the end of a shift, you know, I'd said I felt I connected well with that caller quite early on, or something like that. Or it could have been, I don't think I connected with that caller at all, can't remember. But the supervisor said, connecting is all. Because and what she meant by that was you cannot get anywhere in a conversation with someone unless you can connect. And how do you connect? Well, by making it absolutely clear that you're listening to someone and that you're understanding what they're saying, and then you bring some of the other skills in. So and that's a lovely feeling, you know, isn't it a nice feeling when you are feeling you're connecting with someone who, I don't know, you don't always connect with, or you're connecting with much better than you used to, or wow, I've only met this person 2 minutes ago, but we're already talking about this, and there's we're connecting. It's a great feeling, and probably we could all benefit from a lot more of it. So yeah, and final thing on this, you know, in the stuff I do now, you see so many families where the communication is so poor, there's no connecting or mutual understanding going on at all. Or most, if not all, the relationships are poor or really poor, and they're dysfunctional, and yeah, so you can see the flip side of the coin is leads to a lot of damage.
Thank you, and that's really interesting, and I certainly connect with a lot of what you're saying. I think it comes down to helping or showing the other person that you care, and you value what they have to say. And that's, without trying to plug this podcast too much, that's one of the things that I try and underpin the conversations, that I genuinely are interested in what someone has to share. And it's certainly, as a coach, I've had the privilege to coach people from all over the world, from very different cultures to my own, very different backgrounds to my own, and on paper we could be very, very different experiences and such, but the thing that really helps is that connection in terms of listening. And I'm not trying to big myself up, but it's just, genuinely it's a two-way thing, isn't it? In that coaching relationship, at least, that you're working together and showing that curiosity and wanting to understand, because I think that's how we all grow. If we give people space to speak, and if we do truly listen, we may not agree on everything, we all have different views on stuff, but we can find some sort of mutual ground, or agree to disagree. There's nothing wrong with that, but we need to give space to the other. I'm going into my ideology now of the world is fantastic and we save the world, but I think what you're saying there is really, really key. That connection, I think, is really important.
And what's interesting, I think, but there's tons of interesting things around this, but I often wonder if there are people who, well, there will be, I know, but with whom I would not be able to connect. There will be a lot, but I guess what's behind that question a little bit, and I remember asking this explicitly doing the coaching training, are there people who are uncoachable? I think I just put it out there one session, what do you do if someone's sent along? Because often people are sent along for coaching, aren't they? And they're uncoachable, or people who simply don't feel the need to be coached. There is, and so I've often wondered about that. And so there's a limit to what we can achieve as coaches, I think, because there needs to be someone in front of us for whom there's the door is partly open, probably, and an acceptance that there's someone in front of them who can support them in some way. Thinking aloud there. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's probably not a matter that people are completely uncoachable per se. I think it comes down to a couple of things. So firstly, is the person in a place where they're open to be coached? I think if you just plonk someone in and their heart's not in it, then there's no point. In any kind of relationship, whether it's coachee or friends or teacher, whatever it is for it to work, it's two-way. You can be trying to teach someone, but if that child doesn't want to engage, there does come a point where there's only so far you can go. I mean, obviously, as a teacher, it's my role to encourage, to present the subject, to make it interesting, to engage, and so on and so forth. So absolutely I have a responsibility, but there also comes a point where the child has a responsibility to do their homework. I can't do the homework for them. They're not going to learn that way. So I think there is that whole dynamic of are we able to interact, and are we committed to this process? In regards to can we or do we connect with people, I think certain people we won't connect with purely by the nature of that relationship. We may be coming from different viewpoints. It may be that someone's so irritating to you, not that they're irritating again as their identity, but it may just be there isn't that connection. And I think ultimately partly because it's a two-way thing, and partly I think just in life certain people we just don't connect with. I'm sure people find me irritating, hopefully not everyone, but and that's fine. That's fine. It's just recognizing it. And I think perhaps that is that piece about being resilient as a coach, or indeed as an individual, just recognize this isn't working, and having that open and honest conversation so they can find a coach that they can work with. you know, who's appropriate for them. And I think just generally, to be honest, in life, you'll find that you have people you work with who absolutely you can be pleasant with and you operate on a certain level, but it's a certain level. It just doesn't go any further than that, because maybe your taste is so different. I don't know, but it all comes down to people, doesn't it? People are people. Relationships.
And well, chemistry. They use that word chemistry, don't they? It's a sort of not a great word to describe something that we all know what it means, and that chemistry between people. I sometimes wonder, can you might not have a natural chemistry with someone, but can you create it in order to do your professional job? And my guess is we all can to greater or lesser degree, but we probably all have our limits as well.
If you were to look back at your life, are there any specific life lessons that you would want to say to people who are listening?
Well, just based on my own experience, obviously, but I would say consciously or unconsciously, I've tried to, there's a couple of things here, Mark. So I've tried to invest in my health. I've tried to invest in my family and my friends, the sort of foundations. We all know they're the foundations. But it's very easy to forget that these things are really important. And, I'm 61 now, and I'm not in my 30s or 40s, and I never used to really think about those things greatly. But as time goes by, the importance of those things become greater. So I would say, as soon as you feel able to, just be aware of the importance of investing time and effort and paying due attention to those important things. I would say, from a career point of view, well, I've tried to do stuff that I'm interested in and find fulfilling, and I'm sure that that's what most people try to do. I've not gone after the money. Money's not unimportant, obviously, but I've really tried to do things that I think, are consistent with my values and things I'm really interested in. So, try to follow a career that's fulfilling. And if you're not doing something, if you're really not doing something at the moment that you don't love, or like a lot, then move to something else. So yeah, just a quick anecdote. I had my eyes tested last night. I went down to Specsavers, was chatting to the optician. She asked me as I went in, you do this, don't you? And I said, yeah, because she had it on her records. And she said, do you enjoy it? And I said, well, yeah, I do, or else I wouldn't do it. And then she started getting busy, and I asked her later on, so do you like what you do? She hesitated. She said, yeah, I like it. I have got my bad days. I said, do you like it or love it? She said, I love it most days, but I wouldn't do anything else, she said. And I thought, that's really important. If you really feel, no, I don't want to do something else, then you're doing the right thing. So that's not a bad question to ask yourself from time to time, I would say. Take your time. I didn't really settle into my career until I was late 20s, early 30s. I really did fiddle around. I traveled, I tried different things, but my mid to late 20s were just experimenting. So I was slow to settle. And I would encourage, so my children, I encourage, don't be in a hurry. Just keep busy, keep learning, but don't be in a hurry to get into whatever career it is you have in mind.
Yeah, good answers. Good answers. Yeah. So, what are you most proud of?
Most proud of. So, I mean, there's personal and professional, isn't there? So, I mean, the personal takes care of itself. I'm not going to say what everyone, I hope, should say about their families. They are by far the most important thing in my life. Totally proud of that. In terms of my career, so before I started the business, I mentioned I was in this sort of campaigning, policy influencing, environmental energy thing, and a lot of that was done by working with organizations in other countries to get their energy systems on the right track, make them less polluting. And a lot of that time was in China. And I do remember being part of, so China, so I went to Shanghai. It was at a time when everything was coal there, and they were thinking of moving to natural gas. It's still a fossil fuel, but it's a lot cleaner. And there are good ways and there are bad ways of burning natural gas. I won't bore you with the technical details, but Shanghai had a real opportunity to not only go from coal to gas, but to go from coal to really, really efficient gas. And I do feel that the work we were doing at that time was part of helping Shanghai make the right decisions at that time. And it's a big city, Shanghai. I haven't been there for 10 years plus now, but I sometimes think of the carbon benefits the decisions that Shanghai made at that time must be having now, and I think, well, that was a good outcome. So I do feel in a small way, I played a part in that process. So yeah, I feel good about that.
Excellent. And again, it's another example of what you're making an impact, on people, and in this case, on a country and the world, really. Okay, so favorite 5.
Yeah.
What is your favorite song or piece of music?
So my favorite piece of music is the theme tune from a film called Local Hero. And the theme tune is called Going Home, and it was written and performed by Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits.
Yeah.
So Local Hero is a 1983 film, Bill Forsyth, and it's set in the Scottish Highlands. And it's a beautiful, funny, moving film that ends with a terrific piece of music. And whenever my wife and I hear that music, wherever we are in the world, I mean, we live in Scotland, so that's a good start, but it always reminds us of the Highlands, Scottish Highlands. And it's the Scottish Highlands really is the reason we live in Scotland. So, yeah.
Excellent. And a person that you most admire?
So quite a few people, but just because it was this week. So I mentioned early on about this mentoring I do of a boy at the local school, care experience boy at the local school. And at the school there, they have a number of young people who are being mentored, and it's coordinated at the school by, I can't remember her job title, but she's a support teacher. She's sort of young person welfare. Her name's Gillian. Wow, she is amazing what she does, because it's a school in a tricky catchment area, a lot of struggling children, a lot of struggling families, a lot of challenges facing the school, and she's really at the leading edge of doing her best and the school's best to support children who really need support, and she does it in an amazingly energetic and supportive and impactful way. And so she's amazing. Her name is Gillian. Yeah, Gillian Murray, remarkable woman.
Shout out to Gillian Murray. Thank you for all you're doing, Gillian.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I know the answer to this one. Favorite place?
Favorite place? Well, you're thinking Scotland or Edinburgh, and you're right in a sense. So our favorite part of the country is the far northwest, the Highlands and the Islands and that northwest coast. And there's a little town there called Ullapool. And there's a number of little towns and villages up there. Ullapool is a beautiful place and a beautiful location. And I think, whatever the time of year, whatever the situation, if someone was to plonk me in Ullapool, I would think, and every time I go there, I think, oh, wow, isn't it great to be in Ullapool? So yeah, without a doubt, Ullapool or somewhere up there.
Good choice. And favorite food?
Favorite food. So, I mean, I'm not a foodie at all. And I think probably if someone were to put a plate of Mr. Kipling apple pies in front of me now, I would smile and be happy, and I would start eating them. They're delicious things, but they're not the hallmark of a foodie. So I hold my hand up to that.
That's fine. That's fine. It's all about what your favourite is, and I hope it's got some cinnamon in there, though. Apple and cinnamon.
I'm not sure that's reached Mr. Kipling. They're pretty basic, but very tasty.
Okay. And then finally, book, film, or video game. What would be your favourite?
So I think tons of books, but there's a standout film I really like and have liked since I think I first saw it on BBC, probably when I was about 15. And it's a Hitchcock film, Psycho. And whenever I tell people my favorite film is Psycho, they say, "Yeah, that adds up." Yeah, I mean, it's an all-time great film, great performances, very scary, still a bit scary. Even now, we're sensitized to all that sort of stuff. And yeah, the music, the acting, the plot, the twist at the end. It's an all-round amazing film that I will never tire of. So, and I would recommend, if any of your listeners have not taken the opportunity to see that film, maybe because it's old or black and white, or because of the title or something like that, give it a chance. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing, and look, thanks for your time, Michael. Really appreciate your candor and your insight. It's been really interesting and really helpful, and I look forward to talking to you again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Really enjoyed it.